Hey, it's Sterling. Welcome to another Internet Marketing Masterclass. We're going to talk about outsourcing, one of the most highly requested and popular topics that I get, but also probably one of the most misunderstood. And there's a lot of different mythology running around in the streets about the outsourcing. Some of it's true, some of it's complete conjecture and it's false. A lot of people have some bad experiences with outsourcing, and so they paint outsourcing that way. I tried it and it sucks, or it's too expensive, or you can't find good help, or it's difficult. And to all these different people, that experience was true, but overall there's a bigger picture I want you to get. And that's why we love doing these master classes, because I get to reveal a little bit more of the advanced tactics that I can't really share in some of the basic training. So let's get started by taking a look at our objective for tonight. We're going to be trying to learn some advanced strategies to find, train, and manage outsourcing staff for short and for long-term projects. And one of the distinctions that I want to make right up front is the distinction between short and long-term. There's outsourcing, which is really sort of setting somebody up to do some work for you consistently. But there's also short-term, which sometimes I like to actually call out-tasking. So start to think in your mind, not just about outsourcing, meaning, okay, I guess I have to hire a whole staff. That's usually what we think of when we talk about outsourcing. But also to talk about out-tasking. Sometimes you can just grab somebody to do a little quick task, and a lot of those little tasks add up. Many times, actually, I'd prefer somebody start on an out-tasking road to get their feet wet with giving control over to somebody else and starting the process of moving tasks off of your plate. But also, you may not be ready to actually outsource fully right from the beginning. And another big mistake I see people make, which we'll get into a little bit later, is starting to do too much too soon. It's not that you're not ready for some tasks to be handled, but sometimes people pull the trigger too soon on sort of a full-timer or a full-time staff, and then they get burdened by the cost of the outsourcing before it's really worth it financially for them to pull somebody on full-time. So you can do it too soon, you can do it too late, and you can do it too much or too little as well. So it's a sweet spot kind of thing. We have to find a balance. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some tips that you can use to do that. So here's our bullets for tonight. We're going to talk about why, when, what, and how to outsource. Why should you outsource? When should you begin? What kind of things should you be outsourcing? And how do you do it? We're also going to talk about growing our business overall through leverage systems and automation, which outsourcing and outtasking are a part of. But there's also some other parts that are not outsourcing or outtasking, but still are included in leverage systems and automation. And the reason why I want to talk a little bit more about that is because I want to put your outsourcing and outtasking into context. And very often the little bit of training I've ever seemed to be able to find about outsourcing really just treats outsourcing in a vacuum. Okay, so here you go, here's how to do it. But you might want to know, well, how exactly does it fit into my bigger picture? What stuff should I be doing and when, and where does it fit in overall in the context of where I'm at in my journey? So it has to do with leverage and systems and automation as well. That's why I want to touch on that stuff, to give you guys as much of a full rounded picture as I can. We're going to talk about finding outsourcers. How can we find the ones that are the most talented and also the least expensive? Least expensive, by the way, isn't always necessary or even desirable. And believe it or not, most talented is not always, in all cases, most desirable either, because sometimes people can be overqualified and very expensive for things that it doesn't really need that. We're also going to talk about testing candidates before you hire them. Man, I wish everybody would know how to do this, because so many problems could be eliminated by this one thing. So if you don't learn anything else tonight, if you fall asleep during 90% of what I'm saying, hey, I don't blame you. Sometimes I fall asleep while listening to myself. But if you do remember anything, please remember about the testing your candidates before you hire them, because that is probably the single greatest tip I can give you that will allow you to navigate most of the pitfalls that happen. I'd say probably 75% of the pitfalls. I'm going to show you how I create instructions and assign work to my staff, and I'll tell you some other ways that it can be done. And it's actually surprisingly easy if you know how to do it. And also we're going to talk about tracking what your team is working on in actually two ways, in an overall project management sense and also in a minute-by-minute sort of watching the clock sense. So we'll get into all that in a minute, but first let's talk about why do we want to outsource. Well, I'm going to teach you something that I'm a little hard-headed about, unfortunately, and it's difficult for me to learn and remember this as well. So this is one of those challenging things that everybody needs to learn. And even though I know how to teach it to you, it doesn't mean I'm cured of this, right? So I want you to start thinking about only do what only you can do. I remember hearing somebody say one time, the less I do, the more I make. Now that sounds kind of contradictory, right? So let's talk about the first one. Only do what only you can do. Why outsource? Besides the fact that it sounds like everybody else is doing it and it's the hip thing to do, right? So what? Well, if you do things, I mean, in the beginning you have to do everything in your business. As they say, there's an old saying, I'm chief cook and bottle washer, right? That means I'm everything in this business, right? From the president to the janitor. That's how almost everybody starts out, sort of a one-man show, one-man band, right? But as you go, hopefully, you're getting subscribers and sales, and you're starting to bring in revenue, and then your time constraints kick in, because no matter what all of us are doing, we all still face the 168 hours a week, and if you throw in a couple hours a night to sleep and family and other stuff and just eat and breathe, walk around, you're really left with limited amount of time, anywhere from 40 to 75, 80 hours, depending on how crazy you are about internet marketing. And your tasks increase and swell as your business increases. More customers, more help desk inquiries, more opportunities for partnerships, et cetera, et cetera. But the time doesn't expand, just the tasks. So pretty soon you get squashed up against the ceiling. As the tide rises of more stuff to do, your head starts to hit the ceiling and the water rises higher and higher, and you're kind of getting squished because you can't just invent more time, right? So they say that time is our most precious commodity, even more so than money. And I love how time and money are actually talked about in the same way. Like, think about this. We spend time, just like money, right? Spend money. We save time, just like money. Save time, spend time. It's just like a commodity. But actually, it's more valuable than money for the only sole reason that if you spend money, you can earn it back. You can absolutely replace money, but you can't replace time. So the more busier and successful you get, the more likely it is that you're going to be bogged down with stuff that you probably shouldn't be doing. And that brings us to the only do what only you can do rule. In the beginning, there's nobody else to do anything, and there's not that much to do. And you want to learn all the positions. You want to learn to play all the positions on the field. But there's going to be a point where you're going to have, one day, conceptually, there's going to be a day, and there's going to be a choice between two different tasks that you can do. And one of the tasks will be something that anybody can do. For example, if you're using trafficzip.me and you want to load up a lot of safe lists in there, you have to join these free safe lists and then enter your information into the TrafficZip interface. This is like admin work. It might take you a couple hours to just sign up, get to confirm email, configure your account, then put the information in the TrafficZip. This is a perfect example of what internet marketers might have to do in a day. And at the same time that you're facing that task, you're facing some other task, like creating some unique content for your blog or something, or answering an email from an important partner, or presenting an offer to promote something, to a partner, a JV presentation or something. And at that moment, you're going to know that only one of those tasks is something that only you can do. And you're going to make a decision either to do the thing that only you can do, and then you'll have to find somebody else to do that other task, or you're going to choose the task that anybody can do. And here's the danger. When you do stuff that other people can do, then the things that only you can do go undone. And what does that do to your business? Because there are many tasks and outcomes and results that have to get done in a business, but there's only some of them, a select few of them, that actually require you to do them, and nobody else can do them. Like, for example, tonight for me, nobody else can teach this class. It's just not the way this business works. I can't say, hey, so-and-so, just go teach the class, and somebody shows up and reads from a book. No, I wouldn't want that if I was attending. So, I want to be here. I have to be here. But if I were choosing to do something else, load in some emails into an autoresponder or something, instead of this, then you see how I've missed the thing that only I can do. And that limits the growth of my business. It can cause anything from, not growing as fast as you could to refunds and angry customers, So you have to always make the decision on the highest dollar return activities. right? And I want you to make a distinction too between doing things versus getting things done. This is a very difficult distinction for most of us to make. When we think about getting things done, we think naturally, if we're starting out as a solo entrepreneur, well, the way that I get things done is that I do things. Hello, of course, that's how things get done. If I don't do them, who's going to do them? But this, unfortunately, leads us into this, Atlas syndrome. I don't know if you know who Atlas is, but he's the guy who, in the statue, he's holding the globe on his back. He's hunched over, and it's very heavy, and he can barely stand up, and he's carrying the world on his shoulders. That's Atlas, right, the mythical hero. Well, we all seem to have Atlas syndrome, many of us anyway, that we feel like we should be able to carry everything by ourselves. We should be able to do everything. And, to not be able to do everything perfectly, to need some help is a sign of failure and weakness, right? And that's because we have this mindset. It's just a natural human wiring that if something's going to get done, I've got to do it. But the truth is, getting things done means that making sure that things get done is not the same thing as getting things done. So I want you to start thinking more like a movie producer than Atlas, okay? And here's how that works. A movie producer produces the film, produces in the most literal sense like a mother produces a baby, But the movie producer doesn't write the script, he doesn't stitch the clothes or touch the camera or serve the food to the actors off set, off camera. The movie producer stays in his office. Might never even go to the movie set. They usually do, but I mean, if he couldn't get there, it happens that you could just work in the office. He or she only touches two very important things: the telephone and the checkbook. Phone in one hand, pen in the other, right? And the movie producer manages to produce this film, get the outcome done. You understand? Make it happen. But he's not out there running around holding the camera. Okay, action, quiet on the set. And then going and grabbing everybody cheeseburgers for dinner, So the movie producer is the mode that you want to be in, because the transition from solo entrepreneur to, let's say beginning entrepreneur to more successful entrepreneur usually is a transition from solo to at least solo plus help. Now, I'm not saying that you need to hire an entire staff of 35 people, have them on the payroll, and have an HR person managing all your personnel. You don't have to necessarily go that far, but you will sooner or later, if you want to grow, face that time versus tasks ceiling that we talked about before. You're going to bang your head on the fact that there's just too much to do. And I've got the bags under my eyes over the years, time and again, from finding that out the hard way and not out-tasking and outsourcing when I should have, because I'm still stuck in Atlas mode thinking, well, I got to do it all myself. This especially happens to me. I don't know, I'll make a little personal confession. This especially still happens to me sometimes when I get really tired, late at night, because my decision making, my judgment is a little bit less trustworthy, and I return to old habits, So, I forgot that thing's not up there, so I got to get for the customers. I have to post that thing, and then I fall into my couple years ago, 5 years ago mindset, and I start posting links or something, and then I catch myself later. Oh, what are you doing? Leave this for the staff. So I mean, imagine doing stuff that you have a staff that you're paying to do, and they're not doing it, but you're doing it. Like, what sense does that make, right? But it's just a habit. It just happens to us. So we really, really, really have to fight. You really have to program your mindset, because it's not a natural thing for most people. I'm just telling you. It's not natural for me, and it's not natural for a lot of the people that I know. It's rare that you meet somebody who just sets up from the beginning as a movie producer. It's great to see. I really admire these naturally talented people, but it's not me, and I still struggle with it. So I always have to train myself to get things done, and that usually means sooner or later out-tasking and outsourcing. So I try always to do the highest dollar return activities, and when I'm faced with the typical classic question that you face as an internet marketer, okay, what do I do next? What the heck do I do now? I've got so many choices. What do I do today? Well, only do what only you can do. And we talked before in some of our other master classes and in our VIP training and during Power Month, we talk about, making that decision based on subscribers and sales. There's a video in the Power Month series about if I could give you a compass, and the compass, instead of pointing north, would point to subscribers and sales. So in the same way, we choose tasks based on, will they get me towards subscribers or sales, or am I just doing busy work that's not really, getting me anywhere? Am I just buying some newfangled super 3D keyword spy tool, but I can't really explain exactly how that would get me subscribers and sales? Then that's busy work. So in a similar kind of way, metaphorically, you want to be choosing the tasks that only you can do, because that also gets you to your goal. And if you're doing something that somebody else can do, then they're not doing anything. And the thing that only you could do, that's not happening. And if that's not happening, you're actually cutting off your growth. So back to our bullets for a second. That's why to outsource. What about when do we outsource? Well, I would prefer that you outsource early and often, but in small ways. So I would do some test tasks, not just to test the outsourcers, but to also test yourself, because you have to learn this skill. You have to practice the art of delegating and getting stuff off your plate. There's a great book called Getting Things Done by David Allen. I highly recommend it, and he talks about do, defer, or delegate, right? And he says if it takes 2 minutes or less, you should just do it if it's something that you should be doing. If it doesn't have to be done right away, you try to defer it as much as possible so that you can stay focused on the stuff that definitely does need to happen, urgent and important, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And whenever possible, delegate, right? So you want to build yourself actually, I'll give you two things. You want to build yourself a someday, maybe list, and you also want to build yourself a waiting for list. These can be simple text files. They don't have to be complicated, or you could go online and use any kind of online free task management or list management software. They have a whole bunch of them out there. Just Google free project management, free task management. And be sure that if you're going to do delegation, if you're going to delegate anything to anybody, put it on a waiting for list. So I say delegate early and often, but little things, right? Small things. Because in the beginning, the benefit that you're going to get out of outsourcing this or that particular task is actually not as big as the benefit you're going to get from practicing and building the habit and building those muscles, reinforcing the habit of delegating. So, it's actually better to do it earlier and often, because when the time comes that you really need to be doing it, you won't have to learn in the line of fire, right? So you can never be, they say that you can never be exactly right on time for an appointment, unless you happen to walk in right when the second hand sweeps the 12. Most of the time, 99% of the time, you're either before that exact 9 a.m. appointment or after. So you're either ever only early or late, right? It's only one possible second in time that you could actually be getting there on time. In the same way, you're either going to be outsourcing and outtasking earlier than you need to or later than you need to. So therefore, we want to try to make the decision when to do it earlier than you need to. And if that's the case, start with some little things. So what things can you do? Well, I would suggest maybe you go to a place like Fiverr.com and have somebody maybe sign up some free accounts for you. And you might say to yourself, well, that's kind of stupid. I could do that. Well, you could, but we're trying to get you out of doing that. And you might say, well, that's not something that only I can do. Well, that's exactly why I want you to outsource it, right? It's something that anybody can do for you. So pick an account, pick 5 list building sites or something, 5 viral list builders that you're not a member of, or 5 traffic exchanges, or 5 article sites or something, just something silly. And pay somebody $5 to sign you up with your email address and your password or whatever. Something silly like that. And the reason I want you to do it is because if you can make your first time doing this positive, you really build some momentum later because you've associated some positive stuff to it. Here's what I don't want to have happen. You wait till you're under the gun in a crunch and you've got people upset or something, you're behind, and then in a desperate attempt to fix the problem, you do some reaching out to outsourcers with no practiced skills and crisis mindset, and this is where most of the time people get burnt. So if you can start to build up the muscle, you're really going to be in good shape. And also I want you to put together sort of a bench, a virtual bench. If you've ever seen a sports team, like a football or baseball team or something, they actually have a couple different pitchers on the bench, right? And the bench is ready to go in the event that something happens. Sometimes they have a guy who's called a relief pitcher. So the first pitcher pitches for the seven innings or something. Then they bring in the relief pitcher. He warms up for a while. You've seen him, and then he comes out. But what happens if the relief pitcher hurts his arm or something, right? Or he's doing really poorly that particular game. Sometimes pitchers just have a bad day, and the relief pitcher could be terrible, giving up home runs. They have another 2 or 3 guys deep, that they can go to. So you don't ever want to rely on just one person. I'm not talking about hiring a dedicated help desk person. Then you do rely on that one person. But for before you're ready for that, put together a couple different possible outsourcers and have given them a couple different small tasks, so you're prepared. You have a relationship with them. They've proven themselves, because you have the opportunity, because you're paying, right? So these people should be kind of applying for it and proving themselves, not just you hire somebody based on that they seemed good at the time. Believe me, I've had outsourcers where I've gone to places like Odesk or something, and which is a great place to get outsourcers, by the way, for me at least. And boy, I'll tell you, this guy looks fantastic. He's got all the tests. He's passed the 97th percentile of every test, and you think he's great. You hire him, and then without testing first, giving him any test tasks, and all of a sudden, you got 3 different names coming up in the Skype that you're talking to instead of just one person, and the work is shoddy, and even the way that the people are typing, you can tell it's different people over time, because the company kind of not scammed you, but did their best to get the work. Especially sometimes I've interviewed a guy where his English is fantastic, everything's perfect, and then as soon as you hire him, you get like 3 other different people, and you realize that those people probably didn't take the test. They probably just got a guy to take the test. So, if you don't test somebody out first, you can get stuck. And sometimes people don't even, do the work sometimes. So you just want to do this. When to do it is as early as possible. And I also told you when to do it means to do it when there are things that only you can do that are not getting done. So I hope this philosophical approach makes sense so far, because I could just give you the nuts and bolts like a lot of these trainings do, but it doesn't really answer the why. It doesn't put it in context. Should I be doing it? What should I be doing? When should I be doing it? They don't really cover that too much. So what should you be tasking and outsourcing? Well, there's a lot of things. I would probably suggest the very, very first thing that you can do is any traffic stuff that's admin or mechanical. Mechanical meaning signing up accounts, or mechanical means non-creative, non-discretionary. Non-discretionary means it's discretion, right? It means it doesn't require any discretion. It doesn't require any judgment. Just go to easyinarticles.com and sign up an account for me. It's just kind of like a pass-fail. It's not write me an article for my blog, because that is discretionary. It could be good, it could be bad. But signing up an account just is or isn't, right? Pass or fail. So any kind of admin stuff or mechanical stuff, anything that anybody else can do. And this brings us to a point about giving up control. Don't be a control freak. Now, having said that, that's easier said than done. I find myself often over-controlling these things, and it's difficult for me to let go. So if you're anything like me, it's going to be a challenge. But I want to tell you that being a control freak comes from fear. Fear of that it's not going to be done to your standards. And there's also usually a healthy dose of perfectionism in there. But perfectionism is a killer, because ultimately you're getting the wrong thing right. And that means that to protect yourself, the fear is that you want to protect yourself from a bad outcome, right? I don't want this to go bad. I want to, it's hard for me to let go because I can't trust anybody to do it the way I would do it. I understand, and we'll cover that in the instruction section. But the real fear you should have is not that something's going to go bad because you outsourced something. The real fear you need to have is that something's going to go bad because you refuse to give up control and you won't outsource things, because it's a far greater likelihood that you will have a bad outcome from not learning how to do this and holding on too tightly, right? You have to hold on, but hold on loosely and learn how to train people and learn how to test people and learn how to give good instructions and learn how to inspect what you expect. Because you can hold on loosely enough that it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's good enough. And most of the time, done is good, right? Now, done means it got done at an acceptable level. I'm not encouraging you to be shoddy. I'm not encouraging you, Sterling said I should be sloppy. Just do it and that's fine. I didn't say that. What I'm saying is most of us who are perfectionists or who have pride in our work, whatever your parents raised you to take pride in your work, okay, good. But when that turns into perfectionism, then what happens is it becomes a little bit of a sickness, right? Because if it's good enough, we still tweak it to death, and it ends up never getting done, or it taking so long that you lose the benefit. So done is good. Write that down and put it on the wall somewhere. When you find yourself overdoing something or not letting go because it's not going to be as perfect as you want it, remember that if it's done, it's much, much better than the perfect thing that only exists in your mind, that never gets done. So think about that for a while. Very, very important. So what to outsource is anything small that you can as early as possible. There's one other thing I highly recommend that you outsource besides traffic, and that's help desk. When you can, first of all, you should have a help desk and not just do email support. Right away, instantly, like today, if you don't have one, if you're not a VIP, go find a free help desk and get it installed. If you go to your cPanel inside your site, you can use Fantastico and use one of the open source help desks like OS Ticket or something. OS Ticket is what we use. It's open source, that means it's free, but it's very robust and it gets the job done. We've probably run, I think, we're definitely over 4,000 tickets. We might even be closer to 5,000 tickets now over a couple of years through OS Ticket, the regular free version. Just install it and configure your users and everything, so it works just fine. So whenever possible, get somebody on that right away, because that's the thing that's going to suffer right away as soon as you start getting customers and stuff. I mean, I'm not saying go hire an outsourcer for your help desk when you have no sales yet or anything. I'm just saying when you start to get customer requests and JV requests and stuff, that's when to do it. Hit that earlier as soon as you can, right? So what about how to outsource? Well, I'm actually going to move to this one, how to create instructions and assign work to your staff, and touch on this a little bit as we talk about how to outsource, because this can eliminate a lot of the problems that you may be facing. So here's a couple suggestions. First of all, have a group project management site. You can use something as simple as Backpack or Basecamp, even Remember the Milk, Toodle, Do, etc. These are usually free, and you can always Google like free online project management. The key here is group access, because you can have users and you can type things that you want and put them as tasks on the screen and store them in the account, and then you can even assign them to different people. Stay away from email or Skype chat based Stay away from email and Skype chat based task management. What does that mean? When you start with outsourcers, the first thing you're going to do is start communicating them the what to do's through emails or through Skype or some kind of instant messenger. And it may be convenient in the short term, faster than setting up a little project management site, but trust me, it's going to bite you on the behind, because it's impossible to go back and find everything. You can't just see on one screen what you've assigned. It's a nightmare. So do not do email or Skype-based task management. It doesn't mean you can't email or Skype your people, and it doesn't mean you can't tell them things to do and how to do it, but you have to have one place where you keep the everything. That's what I call it. The everything in one place, right? You have to have any tasks, any files, if you have graphics that have to be uploaded to a website, then in that one place you have the FTP username and password to your site. You have the files uploaded. You have the instructions. You have the 5 different to-dos you know, everything, all in one place. A little bit of organization up front goes a long way, because later on you're going to be doing that he said, she said thing when you're arguing with your outsourcers about how something did or didn't go the way you wanted it. So you have to use something like that right away. Another thing to do is to write instructions. Now, this is the part where everybody falls asleep and doesn't listen, right? So I want you to wake up, because when I say write instructions, people usually tune out. But it doesn't have to be that difficult. I want you to write instructions based on deliverables that are about specific, measurable results. And they need to be deadline based and assigned to somebody. Deliverables are actually written lists of things. Here's a perfect example of what deliverables are. A husband's wife doesn't tell him to go to the store and get some stuff for her to cook dinner. She doesn't just say, go get some stuff. She says, get 2 cans of tomato sauce, this brand, this size, this whatever make of it. I want you to get 3 cups of sugar, you know, whatever. She gives exact deliverables, that there's a list, and he needs to count them off. And one of the most important things you can do is number everything. So don't just say, I want you to put up a website for me. That's about as vague as you can get. Clarity is key. And there's no such thing as over-communication. So always get readbacks. Have somebody sign off on things. Have, not physically sign them, but you know, have a place where you can put things where somebody else can see them, and you can see that they see them. It's not just, you know, I want you to put up a website for me. Instead, let me show you the right way that you would do this. We need one index page HTML file to contact page, you know, 3 about us, and you want it posted to XYZ site. Here's a username and password, and you need it by, you know, June 1st, whatever. And each one of these has to be pass or fail based on reading it. So, for example, if we're going to talk about graphics for a second, you don't just want to say make me a graphic. You have to say I need a JPEG 640 by 480. You know, web safe colors or whatever. You know, I'm just telling you that you have to give as much detail as possible so that that person knows that they can come back from the supermarket with that many cans of tomatoes. Okay? Just think of a shopping list. If you just give them go get me some stuff to make dinner, who knows what they're going to come back with, right? And then you have to argue later, and you have to, you know, haggle over whether you're paying them or not, and it's a nightmare. So if there's miscommunication, it comes down from the boss. That's you. So you have to make sure that somebody else understands. That's why it's important to practice this stuff. If it's anything that's a repeat kind of thing, if it's anything that has to happen more than once, or if it's something that's kind of a complex thing, this is a really great trick. Instead of writing it, record your screen, right? And you can use Jing for this. Just Google the word Jing. It lets you record your screen free for up to 5 minutes or so. Marketerlink.com, our group site for our private community site, also has a screen recording function that you can do it right from the website. So there's plenty of ways to do it. You can also use Camtasia, which is more expensive, a couple $100, so I wouldn't recommend investing in that right away just for this. But record your screen of what you're doing. So for example, if you wanted to show somebody, you know, how to create slides for your PowerPoint, I'm just making this up right now. You would say, okay, how to create slides for PowerPoint. I happen to be using a Mac, so I'm going to be using Keynote, but I would begin recording now, so it would say that, how to create screens for, you know, slides for PowerPoint. I'll go to Keynote, and I would go insert or whatever slide, new slide, and then I would show them type the title here, and put this here, and I'm recording this the whole time, so they see me go to this, then down, then this, then save, then this, then that, and I can go to web pages, anything that I'm going to do, upload and stuff. So you could just capture the screen itself, and it gives them something to watch, right? So they can watch, pause, and do. Very, very helpful, because now you're not just telling them the outcome that you want, but you're actually showing them how to do the thing you want, the way you want them to do it. Now, this is not going to work for things like write me an article or something, but for the things that are more mechanical and admin, which there's a lot of, you can show somebody how to do it, and then there's absolutely no discretion left because they just do it the way that you do it, right? And I think Jing gives you the opportunity also to host these online for free. If not, you can use YouTube for free. And also, I want you guys to know that YouTube now has record directly from webcam. And this is big because now you go into your YouTube account, and if you have a webcam on your laptop or on your personal computer that you've installed, it can see that, and you can just start recording when you press record, talking to your camera, and it goes directly into YouTube. You don't have to record it to your hard drive, then upload the file. It just records it into your account. Another great way, if you have to give instructions, to give it to somebody. And remember, many of us are just better at talking than we are, and showing, than we are at creating abstract, instructions. But if you're going to start doing instructions, especially if you're going to be doing multiple team members, then I want you to start considering process mapping. I just ask you to Google that. It's pretty simple, but it uses a certain flowchart type methodology where there's a triangle, a diamond box and a square box and a round circle, and each one has a function. So the diamond or the triangle, I think, is the decision point where, is this done, yes or no? If yes, it moves over here. Do this task, right? Then go here. And you can even color code it or put it into columns for different people. So Sally creates graphics, sends to Fred. Fred approved graphics, sends to Steve. Steve uploads graphics with HTML, and I review it or something like that, And then if I like it, it goes to Wendy, and Wendy submits to press releases. If I don't like it, it goes back to Fred for further revisions or whatever, And you just map this stuff out. So another great place to do that is a place called Gliffy.com. I think there's a place called Create.ly as well. And these are free online graphics creation programs. Not the kind of graphics where you would make an e-cover for your ebook or something, but they're actually graphics places that you can use to create flowcharts, process maps, and things like that. So whenever you can map something for somebody, whenever you can make it visual, either video, map, flowchart, screen grabs, etc., right? If you use Firefox, there's something called FireShot for free. I know there's also something called Awesome Screenshot that I use on the Mac, and I know that there's a paid program called Snagit, but I don't know if that has a free version or not. But these are ways that you can capture the actual page. Just take a picture of this whole screen, and you can even take a bunch of JPEGs if you had to and post them up somewhere. Take a bunch of photos. The point is, if you don't give clear instruction, then you introduce discretion into the mix, and the more discretion equals dissatisfaction. So less discretion equals satisfaction. And discretion means, choice, letting somebody else decide. So if you just say, build me a website, they might build you something completely different than what you want. They're going to come home from the supermarket with a whole bunch of groceries you didn't ask for, right? So more details, the better. There was one other thing I saw here that I wanted to share with you really quickly about that you can also, as I said before, assign different things to different people and get emails when they've successfully checked stuff off. So that really ties into how to track what your team is working on. So in the beginning, you want to just use some kind of online project management software. But eventually, when you start to move into having more of a team approach where you're using regular people, then you're going to have the opportunity at least to use like a monitoring software. So for example, if you go to Odesk, you can see their screen. It takes pictures every couple 10 seconds or something of your outsourcer's work screen while they're working, and it keeps a little timeline for you so that you can know what they're looking at. So if you see that somebody's surfing the web and reading online comic books or something, you can not use them anymore. But usually the very fact that they know that when they log into the work zone, their screen is being recorded, usually that's enough of a deterrent, right? That they don't mess around too much. That's just my experience. So that actually brings me to a little bit of a side note that I want to just briefly share, and that's choosing between individuals or agencies. So my feeling is, in the beginning, an agency is too expensive and it requires too much investment, and you're not probably ready for that. So in the beginning, you go with individuals, but keep in mind that an individual has no allegiance anywhere. So if you are going to use an individual, you want to make sure you look for something like Odesk or Fiverr or something with public record and accountability. Meaning, you don't want this person, accountability. You don't want this person just free random off of like Craigslist or something, because what is to stop them from not satisfying you? Whether it's to scam you out of your money and beat you for it and not do any work, or just do really bad work, you've got nowhere to complain. So if you stay within some kind of world, like within the Odesk world or within the Fiverr world, they know at least you can give them a bad record, a bad report that other people will see. So it's in their best interest to not ruin their reputation and their rating, right? And especially if you find somebody with a good rating and a good reputation, then they want to preserve that. So even though it's not technically an agency that manages the outsourcers for you, at least it's a place, a website that they have something at stake. When it's time to move into an agency, though, I found that the agency approach is a lot better because I know that the outsourcers are all working in one location, and they have a manager there who watches them, and I can connect with the manager as well if there's a problem. So you're not just hiring the outsourcer by themselves, and of course you're going to pay a premium for this, but for a full-timer, I don't think there's any other way to go. So when it is time to go full-time, try to find an outsourcing agency. I know a lot of people go to the Philippines for work these days, a lot of people go to India, but wherever you go, and a lot of times people go to like Romania for programming, development, and coding and stuff like that as well. So there's different places to go to, but there's places all over the world that people can work. But if you're going to go to the trouble to have an outsourcer that's a full-timer with you, then I would highly recommend you at least seeing if you can afford to use an agency approach, because for that kind of money, you really want to have, for full-time money, you want to have as much oversight as possible, and nothing beats having somebody on site with them, managing them, and you can say, hey, listen, so-and-so's needs some help or something, needs an adjustment or something, and you're not just working with some individual that can get into the wind. So I hope that makes sense. So let's get back to our bullets for a second, because it's time to talk about leverage systems and automation. I'm going to make this really brief, but we talked about banging your head on the ceiling of your time limitations as your tasks and complexity increases, right? So what do you do? Well, whenever possible, you have to use leverage. Now, leverage is, defined as if you ever sat on a seesaw and pushed down on one side of the seesaw and it lifted the other person, that's leverage. You can lift a person's weight with one hand when you have a lever. That's what leverage is. Leverage comes from is the word lever. There was his name escapes me, but I think it was a Greek philosopher who said, if you gave me a lever long enough, I could lift the world. If it was a long enough stick with the right pivot on it, you could lift up anything because it gives you strength that you didn't have. So leverage that comes through systems and automation is highly valuable, and the more successful you get, the more you're going to need it. I find that there's actually two classes of internet marketer. The one that's the busy solo person, whether they're satisfied with being a solo person or not, it's a different conversation, but there's usually a solo person who's either anywhere from busy to swamped. And then there's just a person who has enough outsourcing and a staff, and it's rare that people cross over from one side to the other. It's almost like a battlefield with the bleached bones of those who have tried to go before, because usually they get rebuffed. People who are solo entrepreneurs try to grow, and it's just because it's difficult and they don't do it right, they end up having to go back to that side. They can't cross the river, so to speak. So there's really usually two classes: those that made it across and those that didn't. So one of the ways that you can increase your chances of survival and actually thriving and grow is through the use of leverage systems and automation. So what does that look like? Well, obviously outsourcing and outtasking can give you an added leverage, but also systems. For example, we talked about the free online task management system. That's a perfect example, right? So if you have that, now you have one place that has all your tasks. You can just get in there, type them up. When you need to find out what your task was, you just simply go back to that page and look for it. Whereas if you weren't using that system, if you weren't leveraging the power of that system, then you'd be emailing tasks. So you'd have to go into your inbox and do a search for the person's name, and it could take you 10 times as long, to find that thing. So now it eats up your time. So whenever you can find a shortcut, a little cheat, you need to take it, right? Automate things. So for example, instead of emailing every customer you get and thanking them personally, set up an autoresponder, wherever you can shave some time off and automate things. Not only are you saving yourself time, but you're preventing the possibility of it not happening. So I love automation because I want things to be systems dependent whenever possible versus people dependent. So if you can automate it, systematize it, do so. So let's talk about where to find the most talented and least expensive outsourcers. Well, I prefer a place called Odesk for outsourcers. But you can also go to Fiverr.com, but it's mostly for out-taskers. Now, you can also use Odesk for out-tasking, but there's a certain point where you've got enough tasks that it's not really a set of tasks anymore, it's more like a job. And only you can decide when and where that line is drawn. But I can give you this tip. If whenever possible, try to set up your outsourcing projects to be paid by project, not by the hour. And the reason why you want to consider doing that whenever you can is that if a person is paid by the project, then there's no incentive for them to stretch out the work. In fact, quite the opposite. The incentive for them is to get it done as soon as possible, because the longer it takes, the less money they're making per hour. So let's just say you had a job that, on the one hand, let's split test it. Let's say one version of the job you said that you'd pay $10 an hour for. And another job you posted on a different time, same thing, same like website install, let's say. You said you posted it as a project. Well, if you post it as a project and you get a bid of $100, then if the guy gets it done in 1 hour instead of 10, he makes $100 an hour, and he can take more gigs that day. If he takes 10 hours, he only made $10 an hour. If he decides to drag his feet and take 20 hours, then he only makes $5 an hour. But that's not your problem, because he only gets paid by the project. However, if you set up the same task and tell somebody it's $10 an hour, they might want to get 10 hours out of it, or 15 or 20, or I'm sorry, sir, that needed more, whatever stuff, blah, 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 I needed more time, something didn't work or whatever. And sometimes people can pad their bill and just keep working. So you can find out the hard way. Work expands to take the time you have to do it, and sometimes work expands to take more budget than you thought. So always try to set it by project fee instead of by hourly fee, because then that way there's a limit to it. And it's his problem or her problem, right? And that usually you get much speedier response to the work, because there's no interest. There's an interest in getting it done faster. There's no interest in getting it done slower. I would also recommend, again, giving test tasks whenever you can, even if you're hiring for long term. because you can even post in your description that I have more work ahead, but I need to build a relationship, build a long-term relationship with somebody because we have a lot more work. Don't promise them right up front, but just say, hey, we have a lot more work. If you do, don't lie to anybody, but if you do have some other work you want to do, then they understand that they're sort of auditioning. And I assume, for the sake of argument, that the person is not a good fit and may not be telling the truth, and things may not go the way they promised or the way you expected. Why? Because very often this happens. So if you prepared going in knowing that, I'm not saying that you should be mean or expect failure, but what you want to do is start with no. No, this person is probably not a good fit. No, I'm probably not going to find the person I'm looking for. And then you prepare. You hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. Here's what people usually do. They chat with somebody and they say, oh, my dreams have come true. I finally found the one. And they get it in their head. They buy the dream that this person, I've done it myself, believe me, so I'm not making fun of you if you did it too. That you think, okay, great, I found somebody. What was that song from? I found someone, and you feel like your problems are solved, right? But very often, you're counting your chickens before they hatch, right? And also, people can tell you a lot of things, especially in this global economy, where if somebody's halfway across the world, you wouldn't even know where to find their country on a map, let alone how to find them. So they can tell you whatever they want. People do this all the time. You hear about people have online dating nightmares where somebody posted a picture and it turned out that they didn't look anything like that person or whatever it happens. They may not be telling the truth. They may not be as qualified as they are, stating that they are. They may not be able to do the work that they said that they could do. And if you have any kind of time constraints and you're on the line for something and somebody promises that they can give you a result and then they turn out that they can't, it can mess up your deadline and mess up your customer deliverables and all that stuff. So you have to assume and factor in that they may not be telling the truth, and so you have to find out as soon as possible and really, really manage carefully. And eventually when you find good people, they manage themselves, but in the beginning, you just assume the worst, right? And imagine that things may not go the way that they promised. Imagine you might not even get the same person. And then you'll be a lot more prepared. So I'm not trying to make you negative about this. I'm just trying to make you aware of the way things can go. Hey, you may have a perfect experience right out of the gate, and then congratulations and God bless you. It just doesn't always happen that way, and I want you to be ready for that. So how about finding the most talented and the least expensive? Well, here's a couple things to sort by, especially if you use Odesk. Here's a great way to sort. I always look for 100 plus hours, a 4-star or above rating. I always look for a 4 or above English. Look, I wrote English and didn't even spell it right. How ironic is that? And I also try to look for somebody who has a low enough rate, but not too low, because it's unrealistic, right? So you can actually sort by rate once you put in these criteria. 100 plus hours, build on Odesk. That means that they've already put this many hours in on Odesk, so they're been established for a little while. Plus they have 4 or more stars, so they have something to lose, right? You might find yourself a really super low rate, a super low deal, but when you look, the person has no hours on Odesk. Well, I know I'm sorry for them, but I have to say, I'm not going to be the one to hire somebody who has 0 hours. There are just far too many fish in the sea for me to take a chance on somebody. You're not a charity, you're a business. So let somebody else take a chance on them and stick to somebody who at least has 100 hours, if possible, because A, the person may not be cut out for outsourcing, and they're going to discover that on your dime, or they have no interest in, no real vested interest in doing a great job because, hey, I got no ratings. If something doesn't work out, whatever, I'm not losing anything. And even worse, it could be somebody who had a really bad reputation, cycled out, and signed up again under a new name, right? So having a previous rating, it's kind of like if you've ever used Yelp for a restaurant. You want to find somebody with a good rating because A, it proves that there's been a lot of work that they've done, but also B, they don't want to lose that good rating, and they will fight very well to keep it. So that's one of the ways to find the better ones. And a low rate, but not too low, means that the person is competitive, but not exactly ridiculously cheap, because that can often be a sign that something's wrong. I also want to tell you that there is a huge, huge variance in what pricing that you're going to find. I mean, huge variance. You can find $2.50 per hour. You can find $25 per hour or more. So you might say to yourself, man, what's going on? Well, you just have to be careful of that and look around and see what the other types of gigs that they have done and what they've been paid for that. And you'll also notice things like somebody who is a deep PHP programmer, but the past 5 gigs they've done has been data entry or web research or something. Well, that could go either way, and you have to really inquire in the individual case, because maybe they're saying they're a great programmer, but they really aren't getting any gigs like that because maybe they're misrepresenting themselves, and they're really just a web researcher who's also hanging out a shingle trying to get programming work that they're really not qualified for. Or it may just be a tough economy, or they haven't caught a lucky break, and they are a web developer who's good, but they haven't been able to get the work because it just hasn't been there for whatever reason. They haven't been winning the bids. So they've been settling for web researcher work. So if you can find somebody in that situation who's actually good and can show some results, you might get the deal, And one other small thing to do is not just ask them for a portfolio, ask them to have some examples. But the trick with that is to ask them questions about that job. So if somebody anybody can just, I could go find a website right now if I was an outsourcer, and you could say, show me some of your work, and I could just grab a website and send it over to you and say, oh yeah, I did this site. And you'd say, wow, it looks good. But how do you know? There's no signature on it. It's not like a painting where I could sign the painting. So I usually say, well, that's an interesting jQuery JavaScript calendar plugin. Was that hard to configure? Does that call to the database, or is that and usually if the guy did it, he'll tell you right away what the answer is. If not, somebody will say, sir, I was part of a team, and you go, okay, great. So I know you're not really, at least I'm not sure that you did it. So I can budget my choices accordingly. Hope that makes sense. So we talked about testing your candidates before we hired them. We talked about creating instructions. And I really just want to wrap up with talking about leverage systems and automation, because your ability to make money online will depend on your ability to generate traffic, send it to good offers that convert, build a list, and monetize it, attraction, capture, monetization. So the things I would definitely try to outsource would be, as quickly as possible, outsource the setup of your capture and monetization system, because outsource the setup of your capture and monetization systems, because the squeeze page, the autoresponder, the messages, the signing up of affiliate links, all that stuff is what I call one and done skills. It's really just not something that has to be done very often. So there's not a high degree of return on investment for you learning that stuff, right? It's very similar to a doctor who spends 10 years in medical school preparing to be a doctor for the rest of his life, but right before he opens up his shop, he takes 2 years off to go to masonry school to learn how to do bricklaying so that he can lay the bricks for his building, his doctor's office, himself. Why would you do that? Bricklaying is a one and done skill. You just learn it one time, you build the bricks, and that's it. You never have to do it again as a doctor. You don't lay bricks every day as a doctor. You do doctor stuff as a doctor. So in internet marketing, the equivalent is capture systems, monetization systems are usually a one and done kind of skill. But traffic generation, that's the doctoring part. That's the part that you do every day. That's the business, right? You build the capture and monetization systems, and then you drive traffic to them. So the driving the traffic is the day in and day out actual work, right? So outsource whenever you can. The setting stuff up, because setting stuff up, it just sets the stage to run that stuff. If you remember anything about race cars and race car driving, the guy who drives the car is the one who makes all the money. The mechanic doesn't make as much money as the winning race car driver does, right? So you don't want to be the mechanic building stuff. You want to outsource that whenever possible and drive traffic. So that's why we do the VIP setup service for everybody. That's why we built List Laser. That's why we do a lot of these done-for-you setups already, so that you can just grab that and go and start your day off. Start your day the right way, actually working the thing instead of spending weeks and months and years trying to set it up and probably not even setting it up effectively. So I hope that those tips helped you, and I think overall, if you can just pay close attention to how you grow and gently as you can out-task it first, then followed by outsourcing, be very careful and surround yourself with some good workers. Don't expect in the beginning it's going to go very well, and then when you don't expect that, you will prepare accordingly and actually attract the right people. So I hope that's very helpful. I wish you a lot of luck with your outsourcing, and I hope that you'll get in touch with me and let me know how it works out for you. And if you've used any of these tips, or if you have any other tips for me I can share with the rest of my members, we'd really appreciate it. So thanks for coming to another Internet Marketing Masterclass. I'm Sterling Valentine, and I wish you best of luck with your outsourcing.